It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and joining us is the host of The Show with Edmund Mitchell. It's Edmund Mitchell. Thanks for being here, Edmund.
Hey, Kyle. Thanks for having me on. I'm just coming down from my tower here to join you on the show. No, wait. I'm sorry. Not on the show, on the Kyle Hyman Show.
Right. Yours is The Show. Mine is the Kyle Hyman Show. You were able to...
Better. You put your name in there. That's a better move, I think.
Yeah, well, you got it as a tagline. The Show with Edmund Mitchell.
No one remembers a tagline. What's the tagline to Lord of the Rings? I don't know that I remember it at all. What's the tagline to Avengers? I don't know. Don't spoil it. I don't know what the tagline to Avengers is.
They all die.
Yeah.
I feel like we've done a significant job of plugging the podcast. Hopefully people are subscribed by now, right?
Yeah, no one will. Okay, yeah. Here's what I want to talk. Kyle, I forced you to have me on the show because I feel like after getting to know you a little better, I feel like you're a man of the culture, right? You're a man of philosophy. And I feel like when philosophy and culture get together, those things are really interesting. And so today on the Kyle Hyman Show, I think we need to serve up some cultural cocktails here. I think we need to mix a bunch of stuff together and then just see what happens, because you're a smart man. And I feel like people will appreciate this conversation and hearing your thoughts on this.
I will play the part.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. So I was reading this book by a little man named Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, now Pope Emeritus Benedict, right?
Yes.
And he's outlining like the big problem we all struggle with, whether we know it or not, which is how do we decide what the truth about reality is? How do we decide like how to live our lives? What's true? You know, there's a lot of different viewpoints out there on what's true. And he outlines kind of this history of man's search for truth, right? And so let's go way back, right? Kyle, have you ever been a caveman?
Basically, that's what I've been accused of my entire life.
Okay, there we go. So you have some skin in the game here. So like if you imagine like way back when our primitive ancestors are just experiencing the world. There's no internet. There's not even organized religion in the same way. If we were just to theorize about our primitive ancestors, they're just experiencing the world. And Benedict says that after a certain point, then you start having these kind of organized stories and tales that people start telling each other, or tales of what has really happened in history. So this like kind of mythical, he says, not mythical in that it's all false, but just mythic as like a genre, right?
Okay.
And so some of those myths happen to be stories that were passed on that were true, right? Where we get the story of like Noah and the Ark or Adam and Eve. This is a mythical genre. That doesn't mean that the truth inherent in it is false. It just means that it's the way that's passed along. So then, but that's a big problem, right? The problem of the early world is how do we deal with myths? Because some myths are false and some myths are true. How do we figure out what's true about the world? This is the last part here that Benedict says is there's really only three options that have kind of come about. The first is this form of mysticism. The second that we're kind of going through right now and still trying to experiencing is enlightenment, reason being the absolute value or the absolute good. And then the third would be what he calls the monotheistic revolution. Okay, those are a lot of huge words. Let's just like unpack each one. To this point so far, do you feel like this is general, broad brush strokes of a way we could understand all this? So with your history degree, do you feel like we've done an okay job? You're a qualified man.
I feel like the tablecloth is on and we're ready for the dishes.
Okay, here we go. So Benedict kind of compares these three options. He says, in mysticism, what we see, and you think like Eastern religions, Buddhism, and currently in the modern day and age, it's like this kind of like secular meditation.
Sure.
In that approach, trying to find truth, the absolute value, the thing that is the most important is a mystic's experience of the divine or like supreme truth. So you think like Buddha goes off into a field. He uses all these ways of getting detached from suffering. He's experienced the divine. He comes back to the rest of the community and says, I've experienced this thing and it is truth. This is the truth. And I found it on my own, right?
Okay.
We contrast that with, let's say, the Enlightenment, this huge revolution in philosophical thought, that reason should be the absolute value. Like, we got to use logic. We have to use the empirical method. We have to use, in some ways, it started just getting completely away from philosophy altogether. But the idea that man is rational, and by just sitting and thinking, right? Like Socrates and Plato, just thinking, we can use our reason to find absolute truth. And so the absolute value in the system of enlightenment has become, if you think about it, like, who are the priests of science? It's the scientists. Who are the priests that we value? The people who go off and find truth. Well, the people that seem the most rational and non-emotional.
Okay.
And so he contrasts those two with what he says is the monotheistic revolution. And he says that through the Judeo-Christian tradition, right, which culminates in Catholicism and Christianity, we have something radically different. And so instead of having a mystic going off and turning inward on himself, and instead of just trying to pursue purely reason alone, the Christian revolutionary message is that truth has been revealed. God speaks to us. So in Christianity, there's this revolution. And so Benedict says, all three of those, you can't decide which one's true by reason alone. Because I think there's a ton of cultural implications. I feel like these three themes we see in our culture right now and in the modern conversation. But I just want to get your opinion real quick. Like, what do you think about that? Just first blush.
Well, so if we can't tell what is true by empirical evidence, then I'm a little confused of what we base that off of then.
What will we base off of?
Truth. How do we know if something's true or not?
Yeah, exactly, right? This is epistemology, right? How do we come to know things that are true? And so a lot of times, especially among high schoolers who get really into science, it's like, well, science is the best way to find truth. And so it's all just based on what we can come to know based on the material world. But the problem is we assume so much not based on reason. We assume that our senses aren't tricking us. We assume that we can perceive the whole material world. Every day we're finding out new things about the universe. Inherent in what you would call scientism is this like materialism, this idea that the only truth is what exists materially. But it's like, well, does that truth exist materially? Well, no, it doesn't, right? So inherent in this worship of reason is this kind of like unanswerable question, which is my reason fooling me? Philosopher Rene Descartes, we tried to do this. Can I prove God apart from faith? Can I just purely through reason prove God? And there are lots of truths that you can't prove using just the scientific method or just our reason alone. At a certain point, you have to make some type of a leap of faith. I exist and I'm not fooling myself, or I'm not in the matrix. Does that make sense?
Right.
On the other hand, if we were to play mysticism as the extreme opposite of that, mysticism says, well, look, science is out there and we can tell how big or long or heavy something is. But mysticism says the most important thing is my experience of the divine. And Benedict talks about how with the mystic, it's no longer I am thine. Like, so in Christianity, it's like, I am yours, God. In mysticism, it just becomes, I am thee, right? In the Matrix, Neo is like, whoa, I can see the code. Like, I've seen beyond reality, and it's all just me. And it becomes this like inward facing, like self-worship. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Check this out. This is what I think is crazy, right? So look in the culture, right? So currently, really popular figures, right? Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris. And on a lot of these podcasts, we have conversations around science and then conversations that deal with this hunger for the divine that science can't really give an answer to, right?
Right.
If you take like a Richard Dawkins and you talk to him about the spiritual side of the divine or the supernatural, he's just like, get out of here. Like, right? It doesn't make any sense to him because it's not material. On the opposite side, you see this hunger that can't go away for the immaterial. So you see people starting to dabble with meditation, right? Meditation is starting to leak over into science. Like, well, it has some benefits on the brain. And so, you know me, I'm a huge Joe Rogan fan, like the Joe Rogan podcast. Here's my hot take that I would suggest to Benedict, right?
Okay.
It seems like currently in the culture, the most influential or mesmerizing narratives are narratives that try to combine both the scientific world with this mysticism, right? Like this turning inward to try to find the divine. The answer to all of that would be something like Catholicism, right? So you have, the priest who helped study the Big Bang, but then you also have some of the mystics who have experienced this contemplative union with God, right? Sure. So in Catholicism, with the Christian message of revelation of God, God has spoken to us. You can kind of see the synthesis of all of it. But I just find it fascinating that the culture is now starting to lean towards, for instance, I felt like Jordan Peterson, for those who are listening who know him, he has a tendency to try to use both this supernatural divine world, like, wow, I'm not really sure what everything is, with science. And I think people find that mesmerizing.
Yeah, I think the idea of meditation and some kind of spiritual connection and awareness is becoming way more popular. Another one is Tim Ferriss is always talking about meditation as a way to advance yourself physically and your health.
Yeah.
It's like different splinters of Catholicism are getting out there. And sometimes I think it's all in good, but then sometimes it can be taken down probably a dangerous path as well. Spiritualism can be, if not guided in the right direction, could take you in the wrong direction.
Oh, totally. And I think like people predicted that science and modernism, like technology, is not going to save us. And I think one theory was that, well, we could make this perfect society. We could try hard enough and think hard enough that we could kind of create this perfect society just based purely on reason and the material world. But what we're finding is like that the spiritual hunger, you can't get rid of it. And so we see people that, so like, think about this, like we talk about in Catholic and Christian circles about the rise of the nuns, right? NONES, right. People who are just, they're just fed up with Christianity in general. Well, think about this, like my kids are going to be raised in a day and age where science and people who are very scientifically minded are trying to say, look, guys, science, we can figure out the world. But yet at the same time, they feel like no one can agree about vaccines. No one can agree about whether or not gluten is from the devil himself. No one can agree. So think about this in Christianity, the priest, right? You know, the priest is the priest. The priest is the one who represents like someone who helps us kind of navigate this. In science, you have the scientist as kind of the model of finding truth through science. Well, so you have people just kind of like, they don't believe their doctor, they don't believe scientists, right? So you have this kind of mistrust of everything, right? Of even science, even Christianity, even mysticism, right? You have that. Benedict talks about how the difference is that in Christianity, it's not just a priest, but a prophet. And a prophet is one who comes and reveals what God has spoken. And so, you know, our non-Christian friends who might be listening are like, that sounds insane, right? But the idea in Christianity, the central kind of message that gets us over this kind of leap of faith is that, do you believe that if God existed, he could talk, he spoke in some way, God revealed himself? After you get past whether or not you think something like God exists, the question I want to ask Joe Rogan, who's very open to the idea of spirituality, to the idea of something out there that's other than him, that's non-material, that matters. Well, then the next question is, would that thing want to say something? You know, in the church's wisdom, the church says, yeah, like God spoke his son, like God spoke his word from the beginning of creation to the day of Jesus himself in 33 AD to today. God speaks a word and he invites us to be part of a relationship. So we're not just called to be one with the universe or some cosmic force. At the heart of Christianity is a relationship. And it really can encompass reason, faith, it's spirituality, mysticism, but in a way that's much more holistic and acknowledges the human person. One last point. Benedict talks about how drugs, right? Joe Rogan and some of these other podcasts, Sam Harris. In fact, one of the guys, the food guy on Netflix, crap, I forgot his name, but he wrote a whole book on psilocybin mushrooms, as like, what are the benefits of these mushrooms and stuff, right? So Benedict talks about drugs is just the hunger for the divine being played out in a technological era. He felt like people in the Middle Ages didn't struggle as much with drugs or just weren't as attracted and allured by them as much as we are today. And in today's day and age, drugs offer you a technological fast track. Like you don't have to sit down every day and pray. Just take this and you'll be at one with some type of divine entity. But the question really is out, like whether or not you're just becoming divine with yourself, with your brain chemistry, right? Like you're just experiencing that. So, man, I think there's a huge potential for us to start having conversations and picking up on those three themes of what people are really looking for and trying to give them the full banquet that the Catholic Church, that Christian revelation reveals to us, that is the only answer for man's hunger, you know?
Yeah. So I'm taking it you would recommend this book?
Oh yeah, Truth and Tolerance. It's a really good book. It's converted some people. I think you sent me a text that it's converted some people from maybe like Protestantism to Catholicism. Yeah, it's a good book. Christian Belief and World Religions, which at first you're like, oh gosh, world religions. Is that like that class in college where we just went through every world religion and said, hey, they're all the same?
Right.
But Benedict does an amazing job of just pulling out themes. And religion in general is trying to figure out the answer to the problem, which is how ought we live? What is most important in life? What is truth? What is reality? What are we doing here?
Yeah. All right. Truth and Tolerance. It's Christian Belief and World Religions, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. Where can people find out more about your podcast and what do you have coming up on it?
Man, we got a bunch of different interviews coming up. If people just go to Facebook.com/the show with Edmund Mitchell. But if you just like search the show with Edmund Mitchell, I'm liking the Facebook page because then you can see full like video episodes and stuff like that. But that'd be great. But what people really need to do is they need to go to Kyle Hyman's Instagram, the Kyle Hyman Instagram show, and get in there, get in the comments in there, like, you know, get some thoughts. If you comment on one of Kyle Hyman's photos, he's sure to comment back.
Yeah.
Because he will see it.
Guaranteed. Yeah. All right. Check out the show with Edmund Mitchell. It's on YouTube. It's on Facebook. It's on your favorite podcast app as well. Thanks so much, Ed. Yeah. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been super fun. Thanks, Kyle, for having me on.